Welcome to the Josh Huisman Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another week of the podcast, and it is an honor for me to have my good buddy Jamie Lawrence, who's going to be hanging out and talking with us. And before I even jump into this, I got to let you know how this even came about. So Jamie works for Campbellsville University, and he was in the Nashville area and doing some work for the school and had a bit of a break. And so he popped up because he's hanging out here at New Hope every once in a while. And I was like, let's do a podcast.
Yeah. Sounds like fun. Let's do it.
So you just totally got roped into this situation. So
Totally drafted into this. It's all good. This is my wife and I claim this is our church home away from home. Mm-hmm. We love this church, love coming down here. So it's always a joy just to come and hang out with friends and to visit. So yeah.
Well, and you're a perfect guest for this show because I love having pastors on. I love having those who are working in the Christian arena. You work for Campbellsville University,
right? But
you and I met many years ago. We've got to be going on 20 or more years.
Right at it, yeah. I had just graduated from Western and was a youth pastor at a church. And had a student who had was killed in a car wreck, and we were doing a big to-do for several students. There was actually 3 or 4 students that had accidents and stuff along that time, and we were doing a hope and healing concert, and we're promoting it at the radio station where you were
Christian Family Radio, then known as WCVK.
Right.
Are they still WCVK?
I don't know. That's a good question.
90.7 FM in Bowling Green. 91.7 in Owensboro. This is all 20 years. So Dale, just so everyone knows, the voice you hear on the Josh Huisman Pod, welcome to the Josh Huisman Pod. That's Dale McCubbins. Who's the head over there at WCVK, Christian Family Radio. And if he's listening to this, he's like, you guys are butchering our radio station right now. But yeah, I was filling in as a guest radio DJ at that time, and you came in to promote that event. It was a sad event.
It was.
But that was our meeting.
Right. And as soon as we get off the air, you were like, so, you play music? Been buddies ever since?
We've been buddies ever since. And not only do you play music, you're the best piano player I know, and you're outstanding musician. And
you know what, too?
Well,
just kidding.
That's good. Yeah, my buddy Nathan Brumley, he's gonna be like, hey, what about me? I'm like, chopped liver. But no, but yeah, Jamie comes and is a part of our worship team from time to time. He makes the drive in to be a part of New Hope, and so
love those guys.
Yeah.
Just a quick promotion of those guys. Your worship team here, they're so fun to play music with. These guys they're professional at what they do. And they just make leading worship a joy. It's already a joy to serve the Lord and to worship God. But when you do it with people you really like, it's even better.
Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought that?
What a novel idea.
Yeah,
that's amazing. No, and they love you just as much when you come in and participate in it. They're like, Jamie's coming. That's awesome. So they have a good time. But,
it's fun.
Yeah, and you have been working in the pastoral space, like I said, long before I have, because you were working in youth ministry when I first met you, and I had not yet been called into full-time ministry. And I think that this whole thing is on you. You didn't warn me.
I know. Sorry. Sorry about that, buddy.
No. It was great. But yeah, so you did youth ministry, but you've also served as a senior pastor of a church on a couple of occasions.
I have. Youth ministry, music ministry, education pastor, senior pastor of a church, and then God saw fit to put us in a place to train future ministers.
Oh, my goodness. So hold on. Okay. We need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because there's not many times that I have someone on here who has served as a youth pastor, a worship pastor. What'd you call the other one?
Education.
An education pastor.
Yeah.
A senior pastor. You have run the gamut.
I have.
Of church staff ministry positions.
You know what I found out? I can't keep a job. No.
Well, all right. We can unpack that a little bit more if you want to unpack that. But out of those, when you look back at them, is there one that's harder than the others, or are they all carry their own?
Here's my view on the thing. I love ministry. I was called to ministry, and that's all I knew. I was young when I felt this calling to serve in ministry. My father was a pastor, and he even said, because I asked him when I was 15 years old, I said, so since you're a pastor, does that mean I have to be a pastor too? And his answer was, that's between you and God. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't put that on you. That's between you and him. If he calls you to it, you better answer. But if not, you better not.
Yeah.
And he was very, very adamant about that, because he said back then it's tough. So for me, ministry is ministry. I think the first and foremost thing, whether you're called to serve in youth, children, music, education, whatever it might be, you have a responsibility before God to serve the people of God.
Yeah.
And to reach out to people who don't know God. So overall, there's a similarity through all of it. You just happen to have at that time an emphasis. I will say this. I feel like at this point, I could not go back and do youth ministry and be successful at it. I feel like I've aged out. Mm-hmm. I'm the old guy. I work with college students a lot now, so I've really moved up a long way, right?
Yeah.
But it's a thing where I feel like I've aged out of that group a little bit. Mm-hmm. I can go and speak to a youth ministry and have a good time for one session with them, but I don't know that I have that same skill set to do it again. If God called me back to it, man, I'd do it. But I think that there's phases in life that God calls you to different things. I don't know if any one thing is harder than the other, though. I think they're all have their own individual intensities.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Youth ministry is very much a headspace that you have to be in. And I remember other ministers when I was doing youth ministry saying to me, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you. And at the time I thought, what do you mean? I mean, I love hanging out with these kids. I love doing all this and the work. And when I made the transition and started getting in a headspace of a senior leader role,
right,
I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is a total change. I'm not there anymore. So, I know what that feels like.
Yeah, there are things that across the board that are similar through all of it, mm-hmm. but at the same time, they all have their own facets and unique facets and stuff. Worship ministry was probably the toughest, simply because you're having to do rehearsals. There's so many logistical things you've got to do and all that, and so coordinating people's schedules is not always convenient for people to be at a certain place at certain times, and then you don't have a piano player on a Sunday, and you go, oh, who am I going to call? Who's available? Yeah, those things. That can be a logistical nightmare. It is
interesting. Have you seen the planning center meme that talked about like a worship pastor when you send out the request and you start getting all the rejections?
Right. Decline.
The declines.
Declines.
Oh my goodness. My heart goes out to all of the ministry people who have to work with planning center and the decline stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how am I going to fill these spots?
It gets tough.
People have not much of an idea of the moving parts that go into coordinating services, coordinating children's ministry, student ministry, worship ministry.
Right.
Now you got production and tech ministry. You got all of these different things where there's people. Like you come into church and you think it's just people sitting in the pews, and that's wonderful, by the way.
Yeah.
But all the parts that go into it, man, it's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot. And there's a lot of building blocks through the week of preparing. We prepare a lot for Wednesdays and Sundays. Those seems to be key days, but there's a lot of visitation and other things you do through the week, no matter what your title of your role is.
Right.
We share as a team. A lot of times in ministry, you have people on that team that all do a lot of similar things, such as visitation and checking on people and working on these things that need to be done, missions and outreach to the community, and you just are always going and doing. It gets tough at times because a lot of people see you 2 days a week, maybe sometimes 1 day a week, and then there's those daring people that see you once a year.
The daring people
who
do that. Okay, so let's just give a little bit of some. We've talked about working in churches and things like that. So your last stint as a full-time senior pastor was when?
Almost 10 years ago. It's been 9 years.
9 years?
Yeah.
So you were working for a church in Kentucky?
In Kentucky, yes.
Okay, and then, so you're doing that senior pastor thing, and then you have this opportunity to take a position at Campbellsville University.
Right. And it's kind of funny how that came about. Had been talking with some folks there at the university. I've been going down on Fridays and mentoring. When I was in college, the Baptist Student Union was the big thing at Western Kentucky University. And we had worship teams that would go out and lead worship at different events, and it was fun. We had friends. We would go places together and lead worship, and it was a blast. And so they were looking at creating this thing called church outreach or outreach at the time, and there were students that were going to go out and do similar things. So they came and talked to us at an association meeting one night, and I was like, oh, this is just like what I used to do in college. So I invited them to come to my church. And through that, built some friendships there, and I started going down on Fridays and doing devotions with their outreach team. And a couple times I cooked barbecue and stuff like that and took it down to them and whatever. We had a lot of fun. And it just kind of worked into a place where I was like, hey, if something ever opens up, man, I would love to serve there. And a little while later, I was taking my kids bowling. By the way, WKU used to have bowling as a class, and I took it as a class at Western. And this is funny how this came about, but God works in mysterious ways, and so I'm going to count this as one of those. And so I took my kids bowling. I don't even know what the score was. I had a decent score at this one day, and so I posted, "Oh, look, I'm getting back to my old college bowling average." And one of the guys that I had been talking with there called me and said, "You bowl?" I was like, "Oh, have fun. It's fun, whatever." And they're like, "We're looking for a coach."
Okay.
And that's how it all started.
So, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So you're mean to tell me if I post on Facebook right now my golf score?
Yeah. Hey, there's a possibility you could be coaching golf.
There's a chance that someone's going to call me and say, "Don't quit your day job, Josh." No, but there's no. That's pretty funny, man.
It is funny, and here's okay. I am not a bowler as far as that goes. I wouldn't claim myself as a bowler. I enjoy it like any other recreational sport, right? But there was a need, and the guy who was coaching at the university decided to retire. I was going to retire soon and wanted to do something a little bit easier for a little while before he finally retired. And he put 2 more years in after he coached and then retired to the Carolinas. And so, they were looking for someone. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, but the term that comes to mind, I'm like, necessity creates opportunity.
This is exactly it.
This is when we throw out the resumes.
Right.
And we just say, Lord, bring the right person in.
I came in the door and I talked with the athletic director, and I mean, it's the funny thing is it's not one of those sports. It's not football. It's not basketball. It's not one of those in-your-face sports that you see all the time. Baseball, football, basketball, even soccer. It's one of those sports that, hey, it's there, but it's not as noticed, especially for colleges, because college teams travel. You travel to facilities. We don't have a bowling alley on campus. So you don't see these home games like you see with other sports. And so they hired me, and I came in and coached for 4 years.
So in a bowling, okay, and before I make any more jokes, because I love Jamie, Jamie was very successful as the bowling coach at Campbellsville University, y'all. Like, for real. Yeah. So you went in there and did an awesome job. So I will say this. Now I have all these questions about college bowling because, like, are there home games? Are there away games?
We hosted a home tournament for several years. And, yeah, I mean, it's not really a home game or away game kind of a thing with bowling. It's like everybody shows up and you try to make it as balanced of a tournament as you can. And you'll have...
Are these lanes properly greased?
I believe the term would be oiled.
Oiled?
Yeah.
Okay.
The grease factor goes down, the oil factor goes.
Okay.
This is the thing that got me. The more I got into it, the more I knew some of the stuff, and then I just got more into it, I guess. And thank you, YouTube, for teaching me a lot.
Yeah.
But I needed to go get some certification stuff, and so I went through 3 levels of certification. I am still a silver level coach. There's the entry level, there's bronze, there's silver, and then there's gold. And there are only 29 or 30 gold level coaches in the world. And so I was a silver level coach. I learned a lot. In that
Do you have aspirations to become the gold standard, or is that pretty much?
Nah, pretty much let go of that about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was fun. Loved those kids. Matter of fact, one of my favorite bowlers. I don't have favorites, right? teachers. We don't have favorites. One of my favorites just got married over the weekend, and she'd sent an invitation and stuff. We just couldn't go because my son is in marching band, so I had to be with him, and I wanted to be with him and go through that, and it was a lot of fun. We were in the next county over from where she was.
Really?
So, congratulations to Caitlin, and that was awesome. But you build those bonds with those students, and it became a family atmosphere. One of the things I did when I first walked in was change the culture. I treated this much like I did ministry, which was kind of, I think, the unique thing about it. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to come in. I would not be a basketball coach that would come in and do all the X's and O's. I couldn't do that in bowling. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what to do and how to do it along the way, but I wasn't going to be that guy. But I looked at the whole thing and go, we need a culture change. So we walked in, and the first thing I did was new uniforms, a ball contract that they could be proud of. We were sponsored by a ball company, and things like that. The little things that came along, we did, and we tried to build up when we went to tournaments. I'd find some places to go. We went to Allentown, Pennsylvania on a 2-tournament deal, so it was 4 days of bowling. That's intense. 4 full days of throwing a ball down the lane. And at the end of it, we drove down to Philly. We went to see the Liberty Bell. We saw Independence Hall. We would try to make these little mini vacation side trips on this that didn't take away from what we were doing, but it built the culture. We built that culture of togetherness, and we do this together. We went to the NAI National Championships 4 years in a row, and the last year I went, we were in Topeka, Kansas, and we had these shirts that just said, in big letters, not Campbellsville University, it said family, and it said Campbellsville in small letters underneath, but the big letters were family.
Yeah.
Not only was it the players that had those shirts, the families that traveled with us and would go and would cheer us on, they had those shirts. They saw us come in this wave of these white shirts that said family on it. And it was just so much fun to build that culture. And that helped. We won a conference championship. I was back-to-back coach of the year for the conference. That's, for a guy that didn't know much about what he was doing, it wasn't bad.
Well, I mean, what's funny is I think you're right on. I mean, culture is so important in what you're doing, especially in leadership circles.
Right.
And how you're doing that. It reminds me of when the years when you and I first met. My cousin through marriage, John Kitzsteiner, he was the head soccer coach for Franklin High School in Franklin, Kentucky. And they hired him. He did it for 2 years, and he asked me if I would be his assistant. I played 1 year of soccer when I was a kid. Yeah. So I didn't know a whole lot about soccer other than see-ball, kick-ball, run after ball.
Get juice box afterwards.
Yeah. Exactly. But he was the brains behind the organization, and my job was like rah guy. Okay. Yeah. But he and I worked together, and it was about culture.
Right.
Now, I will say this, we were in our mid-20s at that time, and this kind of language wasn't thrown around those years ago.
Right.
But what we were doing was building culture. How I would explain it today is like raising the water level for everyone so that they can realize they're part of something special.
Right.
When
you have talent, and that was the thing I loved about the bowling situation, is we recruited several talented bowlers, guys that were going to go on and do some great things and maybe even coach along the way. But I wanted to set the bar high for them so they could have a place to go and shoot from. When the team culture was high, when we would walk into a building and we're all dressed alike and we're all, it's a force, and people would go, oh, Campbellsville's here, and not to put anybody else down, but that's just, we wanted that level. Yeah. Well, and it's the same kind of thing with church. Maybe not the intensity at that, but you want to build a culture where somebody walks in and goes, yeah, this is where the Spirit is. This is where God is doing some work. And it's because you're doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it for the right things. We don't get a calling to ministry to make millions of dollars. Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah. But no, that's not what we do it for. When we put the emphasis on the right things, and I had that culture of being genuinely, honestly, wholeheartedly excited about what God's doing. Yeah. Man, the doors just are wide open for what you can do.
Yeah. We have a guy here in the church who he has served as a deacon many times, and he currently serves on our tech team, serves on our missions team. His name is Randy Smith, and Randy listens to each of these podcasts, watches them. And Randy always reminds me, because his first deacon meeting was one of my first as the senior pastor of the church. And in that first meeting, one of the things I talked about as a church, just vision-wise, is we want to get to a place where we do everything with excellence.
Right.
And not because we want excellence to be what attracts people here,
right?
But we want excellence to be the thing that we give to the Lord,
right,
in all that we do. So no matter what we're going to do, we're not going to just phone it in,
right?
We're not going to just show up and hope it happens. But in all the things that we do, down to the way we interact with people, the way our facility looks, our worship services, everything, the word excellence will need to come to mind, you know? And I say Randy because Randy reminds me of this all the time. He goes, I still got the notes from that first meeting when you handed it out. And I thought, you know, when you're in a leadership position, sometimes you think, does anybody remember any of this stuff?
Right.
And man, it made an impact. So I'm thankful for guys like Randy who remind me of that kind of stuff.
That's huge. Yeah, you've got the whole, I think sometimes church culture gets a little backwards. Think about it this way, when we think about the horizontal relationships we have versus the vertical relationship we have with the Lord. Sometimes we serve to get a reaction here when we should be serving to give here.
Yeah.
And it's reciprocated. We give all to God, and He'll bless us. We do need to serve here, but we don't need to do it for a reaction here. I think some churches get that backwards a little bit. You know, it's about the thing I do with worship, especially now I teach worship, and I love teaching worship. That's at the university level, and to know there's future worship leaders coming out of this. One of the things that I try to push is this: it's not about our preference. My one statement, it's the only original statement I've ever had in life. But if we can look past our preference and realize our purpose, then we're going to experience His presence. Get past our preference. It's not about what I like. And we base so much of church and life on likes. It's not about likes. It's about purpose. And our purpose is to serve Him, to glorify God, to serve each other. The greatest command is to love God and to love each other. Jesus gives us that. And so when we realize our purpose, our preferences take a back seat to it.
Yeah.
Then we realize that we're in His presence. We have that realization. And when we realize we're in His presence, well, now our preferences have rearranged now to be more accommodating to that part. My preference is to serve God. My preference is to glorify Him, not to hear songs I want to hear or to do what I want to do or to look big in front of other people. It's to serve Him.
Yeah.
And so that purpose, and Randy's a prime example of knowing your purpose, and he does. And I love you, Randy. He's a great guy. And so, but there's several people here that do that. And I can think of several that they've realized their purpose and their whole demeanor has changed from what they used to be. And so that's kind of huge.
All this stuff brings to mind a conversation I had one time with Dr. Charles McGowan. He's our apostolic counsel here at the church, but he also gave this as a message at the church one time because we're talking about excellence and what we give to the Lord.
Right. And
he told this story where he was asked to preach at the church, and I don't know if he was retired at this point. I don't want to mess up the story, but anyway, his thought was, I'll just pull out one of these old sermons out of the the storage and I'll deliver that.
Right.
And he said, when he was young, his mom used to make these biscuits, and they were so good and they were so fresh. But and Dr. McGowan, if you listen to this, please forgive me for butchering your story. But the short of it was this: Mom would only serve fresh biscuits, and even though she would have leftover ones, she would never serve warmed over biscuits from the day before, because she knew that they weren't done with excellence and they weren't fresh. So he said, it taught him never pull a sermon out of just storage, but always bring fresh biscuits, not warmed over biscuits. And I was, he ruined me because I was like, well, I mean, sometimes I want to use warmed over biscuits, but that's a lot of work. But it goes along the lines again with excellence and what we give to the Lord. We can deliver messages. We can do things. We can do status quo in ministry.
Yes.
Who knows when we're just phoning it in? God knows.
He does.
Okay. And there are times in ministry where you can find yourself falling into that rut or getting stuck in that rut. And if anyone is in that rut, let me just encourage you to get fresh.
Yes.
And maybe renew your passion to bring excellence to the Lord. Because you're right. If you're always preserving this horizontal thing, if you're doing this for the pleasure of men, men, women, whatever it may be, that's not, pretty soon you're doing warmed over biscuits.
Right. Exactly.
You know? So anyway, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because we might have some people listening here and go, what are you talking about? You teach worship. Right. Don't you just get up there with a guitar or sit at the piano and sing a song? That's it, right? That's worship.
Sure.
What? So let's do a little education for the audience. What are we talking about when you're talking about you teach worship?
All right. So I teach in our School of Music. Let's just go to the bare bones of it. I teach in School of Music in the area of worship arts. And when we look at worship arts, for me personally, I take that to a whole level, even beyond music. Everything we do unto God is worship. Mm-hmm. And so you have to think about things you do in life that you go, is God going to be pleased when I do this? Because we are created in his image for his glory. If anything we do in life doesn't glorify him, man, we do these things in worship. We live in worship to him. Mm-hmm. That's our life. All right, so that's getting a little deeper with it. But the music portion of that is kind of what I teach, how to arrange a set list, the logistics of worship, the logistics of Sunday morning, what it looks like when we talk about that. But I also go a little deeper than that, to that level of, hey, live it. You're not putting on a performance for somebody. This is not about performance. This is about pleasing God. Mm-hmm. And so we don't walk up on a stage and sing a song the same way that Elevation or Maverick City or whoever would sing it. We sing it with all of our heart. Not that they don't. Mm-hmm. We don't sing it to sound like them. We sing it to sound like us glorifying God. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing we try to encourage our young worship leaders, that they want to be worship leaders, and they want to do it at a great level, so they get a degree in it. And so I teach what worship is and the different aspects of that, how deep that goes. Because you look at the aspects of being a worship leader, building a set list, working with musicians. You have musicians who are classically trained, musicians that have taken lessons for several years, musicians that play by ear. They picked up a guitar and they learned in their bedroom. You have musicians all levels, everywhere, that are serving in churches today. And so we try to teach how to deal with every aspect you're going to deal with. Mm-hmm. One of the big things that I try to push is have the heart for it, because in leadership, you're not always going to get a rosy feeling. It's not always going to be sunshine and roses when you walk out there. There's going to be somebody who walks up to you right before a service and levels you. How do you deal with that? Mm-hmm. So I present questions to my students when I talk to them in class, and we have discussions on how do you get through those mornings where things just don't go right. All the tech stuff's falling apart, and you just can't get anything to work right. There's bugs in the system. What do we do? And
Sutton, who's behind the scenes right now, our worship leader and whatever, can tell you all about things going haywire. Yeah. During even the actual service. The fact of the matter is, the more things that you have with power buttons, the more problems you're going to have.
Amen.
That's a weekly occurrence for us. And then you'll always have the folks, well, that's why you don't use any of that stuff. And it's, okay, let's just put that over here for a while.
It's a whole other discussion.
That's a whole other discussion. We won't go there.
We don't have time for that.
Okay, so you talk about set lists and building set lists. What are you talking about? Just pick 3 songs and run, right?
Right, sure.
Isn't that it?
Nah, well, let's dig into that a little bit, because growing up and serving in worship ministry, I was blessed. I had a pastor I worked with in 2 different churches. Senior pastor I worked with, Dr. Tom Stokes. And to this day, if I called him right now, we'd probably be on the phone for an hour talking about different things. I would go into the sanctuary when I was working with him. I'd go into the sanctuary and just sit and play piano. Mm-hmm. And it would help me clear my mind on Mondays. Monday is, every pastor will tell you, on a bad Sunday, Monday they quit. Or Sunday afternoon they quit, and Monday they start back in their job again. It's one of those things where you get frustrated. So I would go and just clear my mind on Mondays. I'd sit down and just play. And he said he would come in, he would prop the sanctuary door open and prop his door open in his office.
To hear you play?
To hear me play. And I didn't even think about that. I just knew he was propping the door open. I'm like, okay. I didn't know until years later that's what he was doing. And so, you know, he and I would talk. And sometimes we wouldn't talk. We would pray together. Every chance we got, we prayed together. And I'm thankful for that leadership. It taught me a lot about prayer and the efficiency of prayer when you're serving, especially serving together. They always say a family that prays together stays together. I think a church staff that prays together stays together. He taught me a lot in this. And so we would talk about what was going on in the service. Sometimes I just kind of had this feeling of where he was going with the message. And I would sit and work out songs. I am weird in how I do my method of it. I'll make a set list of all kinds of songs. I know he's gonna be preaching on this topic this week, and I will make a list of all kinds of songs that might flow into that topic. And then I sit down and work through the details of these lyrics, and I look at lyrics and I pray over that list. And I'll look through and see what's going to work best, what's going to flow the best together, what's going to be a great way to set up his message, so that we're actually into the message before he ever takes the platform. Mm-hmm. And then transitions. I'm a transition guy. How are we transitioning from this to that? How do we get to this place smoothly so that I'm not a distraction to the message that's coming? Mm-hmm. If we do this, and it's always, there's this, through the years, there's been this battle sometimes between pastors and worship leaders as to who are people really coming to see on Sunday mornings. Old school stuff, you know. There's that it's kind of a joke, a running joke for some guys and stuff, and it's some places it's real. But if you work together, you start learning how each other thinks, and you can flow things, and you work together to that. It's not about the music or the message; it's about all of it together, giving the Word of God to people in such a way that when they leave the church that morning, they know exactly what's been going on. They know the message; it's in their heart. It's not sitting here in their brain rattling around. They've already taken it in because they've been spending an hour on that same topic. Yeah. So there's some complexities to it. And then you have to realize, especially this, and this is, I think of a church like here, and then I think about my home church where I grew up in a little country church in the edge of Barron County, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. They had a piano. That was it. Yeah. Here, you have several musicians. So when you think about a set list for each of those places, they're going to look dramatically different. Right. Know your culture. There's that culture of where you're living, where you are, what's going to go well there, what they're going to understand. It's not about I'm going in to change everything. It's about I want to go in and hone in to get this message across the best way I can. Mm-hmm. So I think about the old country hymns, not the big church hymns. They wouldn't understand any of those, you know. Mm-hmm. Nothing against them. But you do a country hymn out there, a little I'll Fly Away, and some of the songs they would, with the idea of taking that message to the next level, it's going to spread the message. It's going to get the message across very efficiently. And that's what we want to do. We want to share the love of God in such a way that people hear it, they understand it, they take it in. Yeah. You know, I grew up the child of worship pastors. Yes, you did. And I've been a part of so many different styles of worship and attended churches that had all different things. And I'm so thankful for it because it really gave me a taste of everything. Mm-hmm. And so every once in a while you'll run into someone who thinks there's only one way you do worship. There's only one way. And what they're usually talking about is methodology. Right. The one way is the way that we do it. Right. But I was just considering myself blessed to enjoy all different. So when you talk about that little country church mm-hmm. with the piano and just that, there are times when I just love that. Yeah. There are times when I love just walking into a place and it's just those hymns that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't grow up with hymns in the church. We did it every once in a while. Right. But not a traditional hymn church in that sense. But I love those moments. And then I love the contemporary, and that's not even the right word anymore for it. But right. But I love really honestly what we do at New Hope with mm-hmm. With a very current worship sound and the things that we have. And I love being a part of that. I love when those two get mixed, and then I'll have Pastor, would you guys do the combined? I was like, why do we got to put names on everything? Right. How about we just chose what we felt the Lord was wanting us to sing today? That's it. How about that? Why do we got to put it in a category?
And then churches split, denominations form over these arguments that don't even need to be arguments.
Right.
Over worship. How about we just follow the lead of the Spirit and we sing it,
That's it.
And I was thinking about, you were talking about picking worship songs. For me, one of the things, and I've never been on staff as a worship leader.
Right.
I've worked with many worship leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I was joking. I had Sutton on here a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, the worship leader's the job I wouldn't want to do. But just so many thoughts and opinions on that.
There's a lot.
But like in the times when I do get to fill in and lead, the songs that I love to lead and the songs when I'm praying about it are ones that I want to be leading people in worship in songs that when they hear me sing it or lead it with them, they go, that guy believes that.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, like he's not just getting through the song.
Right.
And let's go, all right, let's move to the next one. But oh my goodness, like he's all in on this.
Right.
And I think that's infectious.
It is. How many times have you sang Amazing Grace in your life?
Many.
Right. And it's easy to let that song, because it's an old song, but it's an anthem of the church.
Yeah.
It's easy to let that song just pour out and go, oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about right before I became a Christian, right before I gave my life to Christ, I think about that moment, and I think about the grace that was given to me.
Mm-hmm.
Man, then it becomes amazing grace for me. And so we have to prepare ourselves. In leading worship, I think that's a key element. Sometimes, especially, listen, churches that are smaller churches that one guy has to do 25 jobs, and you go in and you're rustling through and trying to get things done, and then you show up on the platform, put your guitar on, and
Yep. Keep talking. I'm looking something up. I'm with you.
You just keep going. And so you keep rushing through these things. And sometimes we miss the mark, but it's not because we're not trying. It's because sometimes we get busy with life. And so I think there's this point where I had heard someone talk about Hillsong from way back, the Darlene Check days, where they would get together in a room back behind the stage and they would worship together. And what they did was there was no distractions in that room. You came in that room and you prayed and you started worshiping together before the service ever started, and then it just poured out onto the stage. And so everything you sang was just purely a praise to God. I think there's a lot to that maybe we're missing today. I love to see a church staff and deacons and whoever wants to will go back, the church leadership, go and pray together before a service, and that's great. And we need that. But I think even more than that, get together and worship. Yeah. And then let it just pour out.
And when I was looking up while you were just talking right there, you brought something to mind. And I don't know that I've ever verbalized this before, but I guess it's just kind of like my approach in worship when it comes to certain songs. There are certain worship songs when I'll hear them for the first time or they're on my playlist in the car that touch my heart in a way it just hits different than other songs, and I don't know why that is, but I'll have times when maybe I'll be out on a hiking trail and a worship song will come on that I haven't heard before, or one that I have, whatever it may be, even if it's one that you said Amazing Grace, there might be something I'm going through in a moment, and Amazing Grace comes on the playlist, and I'll have to sit down and just worship, just take it in. There's worship songs that bring me to tears. There's worship songs that bring me complete joy. There's one that I put in our monthly newsletter, that one of my favorites is called Living in Your Goodness. I'm living in your goodness, dun, 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 promise. Now I'm off the top of my head, but anyway, that's the melody. Right. If I put that song on, I'm in a good mood. Yeah. Like I am just joyful. Whatever, like I know I need to put that on. So like when I'm pulling into the church parking lot on Sunday morning before church starts, boom, Living in Your Goodness is on. There's another one we just did this past weekend, Holy Forever is a new big song. Love it. That's out there now. And I think we've recently lost people in our family that we love dearly, and they're in heaven now. Right. And the opening lines, 1,000 generations falling down in worship. I just picture our family there. Yeah. In singing to God forever and ever. And here's what I looked up. In 1 Samuel 7, when it talks about Samuel and the amazing things God had done, and they set up Ebenezer's as a reminder, I think like we should use worship songs when they touch our heart in that way. And I'm talking to worship leaders out here.
Yeah.
If you have worship songs that create those moments
Right.
where when it's just you and God brings you to tears in worship or gives you joy in worship, that's an Ebenezer worship moment.
Yes.
That's a stone that if you're a leader and you are blessed to be called into worship leading, that's how you lead a song and show a whole congregation of people that person, they believe what they're singing.
They do.
You've had that Ebenezer moment.
Yes.
You know?
It's powerful when you find, especially when you personally are moved as a worship leader, when you are moved. I think that's part of the problem we have today is we have become a culture of making worship music a pop culture thing. Mm-hmm. And we have to be careful of that. What song's in the top 10? You know, I pull up CCLI, pull up my song select, and I'm going, what's the top 10 songs here today? You know, and you can easily keep up with those things. And I do just because of the nature of what I do when I teach. I want to know the new stuff that's out. I want to know what the new songs are. So when students are bringing them to me, I'm like, yes, I've heard this song. Yes, I've heard this song. I love when I get stumped and I haven't. And I go, oh, I need to listen to that. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing is we've made it a cultural thing where it's like listening to, you know, rock and roll top 40 or whatever on the radio. We don't want to get to that place where it's glossed over. It's not just a song and we like it because it's a bop. That's a student thing. Thank you, college students. and I love when a song has a good feel to it, a good rhythm to it. And that's all good. That's the musician in me that likes those things.
Yeah.
But when you have a song that will absolutely move you to tears or move your heart, when you lead that song, again, you go back to what you said earlier. This person believes that song. Mm-hmm. They believe what they're singing. I'll say this. There are 3 students. I love all my students. Don't get me wrong, kids. I love you guys. But I have 3 students I've worked with for over a couple years now that sing together. One of those is my daughter, Kaylee, and Jacob and Colin. They've sang together for quite a while. We were working at a church and doing a youth Sunday. And I said, they wanted special music. Cool, what are we going to do? And I'm sitting here thinking, what's the top 10 songs for a youth service we're doing in front of the whole congregation? And all 3 of these students go, can we do How Great Thou Art? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just sat down at the piano, which is piano and them singing, and their harmonies were amazing. They worked out the harmonies for it. And I'm telling you this, when they finished that song, they had tears in their eyes. The whole church stood.
Yeah.
And they were moved because these kids believed what they were singing.
Yeah.
And so that's a special place to be. Mm-hmm. And if there's ever a song that you're singing that you can't relay that message of, I truly believe what I'm saying right now, don't sing that song.
Yeah.
Maybe not forever, but at least that Sunday, that's not the song to do. Mm-hmm. You know, there has to be a heart connection.
Yeah. And any worship leader who's been doing it for a while has been in a moment also when you have a song that you believe in and you're like, surely the congregation, they're going to get all in on this. And then you do it and you're like, oh my. Yeah. That doesn't work at all in this context.
Right. And I'll say this, there's something I think this is something that's global that needs to be done, maybe, especially here in the U.S. We need to teach on worship. When it comes to teaching or preaching about worship, we always go back to the woman at the well, you know, and some say you worship in the mountain, some say you worship in the temple. What do you say? Uh-huh. We always go back to that scripture, but I think there's a whole lot of wealth in worship scriptures out there. We just don't realize it's talking about worship. And the Bible as a whole should be our guide for everything we do on that. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that we don't teach enough about what worship is at times. Overall, you know, that's I go to several churches and you just watch the congregation and they're just dull. They was it the old saying they check in at 11 o'clock sharp and they leave 12 o'clock dull. So that's good. You're welcome.
It's funny, and you know, we've been trying to encourage our people at New Hope, especially, you know, to participate in the worship, to be singing and things.
Right.
I will say too, you talk about culture. Mm-hmm. Culture as a whole has become much more of a spectator sport, where everyone just kind of stares and looks and says things like, "Oh, well, I don't have the best singing voice," or, you know, I'm kind of hesitant. I didn't know I could say amen. I didn't know I could raise a hand in the air. I didn't know I could. Right. And there's just way too much thinking going on.
Yeah.
Instead of just being present and worshiping the Lord and forgetting everybody else in the room. And
right. And I think it goes back to that statement that I made earlier, and that's applied to so many things. If we can get past our preferences. Mm-hmm. My preference is just to stand here and be quiet. My preference is not to sing this song because I don't like that contemporary stuff, or I don't listen to that old hymn stuff, or I don't like bluegrass music. You can worship in bluegrass, by the way. But I don't like this. I don't like that. If we get past our preferences and realize our purpose is to glorify God and to praise Him in every aspect of our life, man, then we're going to realize His presence. Mm-hmm. So I think in teaching more about worship and teaching more about what worship is and as an individual, who we are as a worshiping individual, it's one of the things I'm working on in my PhD and where I'm doing that, but that's about teaching about we're worshipers until the end. Mm-hmm. We are made to worship God. That doesn't stop when you retire. That doesn't stop if you go into a facility or you go into a retirement home or a retirement village, nice little villa off the beach in Florida. It doesn't stop there. Uh-huh. The moment you take your last breath here is the moment you enter eternity and you're face-to-face with your Maker. And I believe that's when your worship just carries over to the next place. So we're never stop worshiping. There's not a check in and check out. It's not a friend of mine, Steve Bridgman, has got a song out right now that is huge. And it's made me think a lot about this. And it's called Between Sundays. Mm-hmm. What are we doing between Sundays? It's how we live. It's how we do everything we do. And it's powerful to think about, wow, I can witness somebody on a Tuesday morning. I can share Jesus with somebody on a Thursday afternoon. Mm-hmm. I can be in my car and having the worst day of all days on a Friday and just get away from everything for a moment and worship God. Mm-hmm. I don't need somebody else leading worship. I don't even have to have the radio on. I can worship God in silence at times. So worship is something we are made for. It's what we're built to do. And so, when we talk about teaching worship, man, I'm just trying to help people realize who they are.
That's very cool and much needed. I agree with you that we need to be doing it. I'll tell you a cool worship thing that I'm kind of doing right now, and it's a scary word for some people in the Bible, but the word meditation. Mm. But the Bible, meditating on God's word, it's in God's word that we're to meditate on the Lord. And there's 3 worship songs that I use that sometimes each day I'll lay down or I'll find a chair or whatever it may be and just try to clear my head. Yeah. And 2 of them are from the group Leland, where there are 2 spontaneous worship songs I have, but I'll just tell you the one. It's Wait Upon the Lord. Yeah. So it's just Leland, and there's just a pad there, and it's just trying to clear my mind and just focus on worship. And when I say clear my mind, I'm not trying to go to an inner place where I can dictate this and do this or whatever, okay? Right. And do some kind of Eastern whatever. I'm not doing that. I want to focus completely on God.
Right.
And clear my mind of all those other things. And so Leland, in this one song, he's just singing scripture. He's going, come on, let's wait upon the Lord. Right. He will renew our strength. And they just kind of keep repeating that, but it's a nice pad to it, and it's just there. And it builds, but it goes 7 minutes. Right. There's another one from Phil Wickham where he does the 3:16. For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son. Whoever would believe will never die. And then he just kind of goes on. And in those moments, I'm just using that worship and just focusing on the Lord and letting them sing and kind of lead me there. Right. Instead of putting on Taylor Swift or what are some groups we could name? I'm not even up to date on current, or instead of putting on your Creedence Clearwater Revival or the Eagles or these other things that get you out of whatever. Use worship to focus completely on the Lord. This just took a left turn, but anyway, you know what I'm saying? And I think for me, going back to those Ebenezer moments, for me, that those things create, it's like, man, Lord, if you, because I do music, I'm not as good as you, but as far as playing goes, but if the Lord gives us those moments in our personal worship with Him, as worship leaders, if we're called to it, and it is a calling, right, then God gives us that calling to usher other people into those same moments that God has with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that's the special thing about it, especially when I guess what I get to do in cultivating, I'll use that word, cultivating this next generation of worship leaders, is seeing them grow and seeing them go from, I like this song. This song's a bop. This sounds good. I like the fun. I like the sound of the song, to sitting in a worship service and you see them not be on the stage and be moved to tears, sitting in the front row, sitting in the back row, sitting somewhere else in the chapel, and you see them honestly pouring their heart out to God. Then you go, hey, I think you're there. I think you're at this place where, not that you've made it, we never make it till we get there, till we get to heaven. But you see them draw close to God. Yeah. And you go, do that. Be that honest when you're leading. Be that honest when you're standing in front of a microphone, when you're playing a guitar, when you're playing drums, when you're playing piano. Be that honest in everything you do. And when you're that honest in everything you do, when you worship, those Ebenezer moments, you see more of those. Yeah. And that's what we want to do. I don't want it to be once a year. I get moved by God twice a year. Easter and Christmas, I get moved by God. Exactly. That's not it. It's about truly finding those moments on a daily basis. Even. Yes. If you can get to that place, man, what kind of world are we going to live in then? Yeah.
Well, I keep referring to these Ebenezer moments. So let me just give everybody a little bit more background. So it's from 1 Samuel chapter 7, okay? And the word Ebenezer means stone of help. And the reference comes, so after the Israel defeated the Philistines, Samuel raises his Ebenezer. And the Ebenezer is a reminder. You put it there to remember what God has done.
Exactly.
So that when you look back, you have that. And we don't do a good job about this. We always, all throughout Scripture, there's a whole lot of, what have you done for me lately, God? Yeah. As opposed to looking back and being thankful. And I think God always calls us, remember. Right. Remember what I did. And so when I'm saying worship Ebenezer moments as worship leaders, or when you have these moments where God just touches your heart in a special way, plant that Ebenezer and go, I'm going to always hold on to that cherished moment of worship. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And pushing to see those moments more. We've had a blessing and total glory to God. This is not us. This is not our students necessarily. I'm thankful for the way that they've come along and wanted to be part of these events. And in 2023, we were talking about the other day and added it up. We've seen 113 salvations this year in other churches and people that are committed now to grow in Christ and stuff. And I told our students that I was like, look, you do realize you were at a place, you were part of a moment. Yeah. And you allowed God to use you in such a way that it changed somebody's life. Mm-hmm. And it's moved people. That's what we want to do. Yeah. We want to be agents of change for God. And that's it. Mm-hmm. To be a tool that's used for God, and then get me out of the way so God can truly invest in that person. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what we're doing now is more of an evangelistic type of thing because we're not an actual church worship team. So we always want to make sure we are connected to those worship pastors, and hey, make sure you take care of those people, disciple them, get them growing. But it's a beautiful thing to see that we have this opportunity to go and serve and see those moments in other people's lives. Mm-hmm. Man, what joy. That just, I go home and I can't hardly sleep at night whenever I see those, because it's just, you're excited to see God move and do good stuff. And these students are seeing those things happen. Mm-hmm. That lets me know we're on the right track for this stuff and what we're doing. And it's a thrill. It's a joy to serve. And to get to come to churches like this and serve alongside of people that get it, that truly are worshipers first before they're worship leaders. That's a great thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, before we wrap this thing up, Sarah and I, my wife and I, for those who don't know, we recently went to the Cove, Billy Graham's place in Asheville, North Carolina. Have you ever been there?
Never been there.
Oh, Jamie. All right. You're going.
I'm going.
We'll figure out a time. So we were there and listening to, it was a pastor renewal retreat. Erwin Lutzer was the speaker, and the worship leader was Marty Goetz. And Marty Goetz is a Messianic Jew. Yeah. He calls himself a Jew who's made anew. And wow. He said it in a radio way. Wow. Actually, I'm going to try and get him to come on the podcast. He's going to do it. Marty, you're going to be here.
Good luck.
But you talk about the old hymns that can be made new. Marty does a wonderful job at that. He played some current things as well. He let us in "Be Thou My Vision" as one of the hymns, and it was old school. There's no new way of doing this, but God just hit this in a special way, where we get to the second verse and He said, "Okay, now just the men," and the men, and this a room full of pastors. Listen, it was a special moment. Everyone was just belting it out. There was no shame,
right?
No worries about hearing my voice. And we were in this smaller room with just a piano, and you hear all the men's booming voices. And I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And we get to the third verse, and he goes, now just the ladies. And it was the pastor's wives.
Right.
And they just sing, and it's just the women. And I'm like, is there angels in this room? Like, what is and I'm like looking around, and I'm kind of like caught up in this moment.
Right.
All right. I've heard you talk about Amazing Grace. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you heard "Be Thou My Vision"?
Right.
Many times.
Many times.
And I'm sitting there going, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. And this will be airing a few weeks down the road, but we put it into our church worship service. We're doing "Be Thou My Vision."
Right.
And we're having that. And so you have those moments, but then I will also have those moments. The very first time I'll hear a new worship song, a brand new worship song that I don't know the words, I don't know the melody, I don't know nothing about it,
right.
And God will use it to bring me to the same place. So I am not a big believer in someone going, well, I don't know the song, so God can't speak through it. It's like,
right.
That's you.
Yeah. Okay. You don't know the song, but if Taylor Swift had a new song on the radio, you know it by next Tuesday. Wholeheartedly, you put effort into it.
I don't know about the 80-year-old elder who would know Taylor Swift.
Don't underestimate it, buddy. Okay. I know a few.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, that's the thing is I served in a church and had a lady in the choir brought up wasn't even a really new song, new to them, and brought it to them. And this lady loved her country music.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a long time ago. So she said she didn't like the song, and it's just, I don't know the song and I don't like it because I just don't know it. And that's mainly why I don't like it. And I'm like, okay, great. So we went on with a little bit of a conversation, and I said, did you hear the new like Martina McBride song that came out? And she was like, oh yeah, I love that song. Da, 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 da. I'm like, it's new. It's newer than this one. Just saying. She was like, I don't like when you do that to me. But right. It just kind of proved the point. Like, what do you put effort into? Mm-hmm. What do you, who's more important? And God is, obviously. And so when you put those effort in those songs, man, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I grew up, not just in a little country church, but I grew up, before we played music together, I played Southern gospel, which is my dad's era of music. They loved it. There was the quartets, and that was fun stuff. And I loved it. I was forced to love it as a kid. My parents made me listen to it. My dad especially. I grew to love it. And even to this day, there are songs that are kind of standards in the realm of Southern gospel music. Well, I'll pull a chorus of that and put it in the middle of two contemporary worship songs, and it makes a nice little bridge across because it has that message. And so, you never know what you're going to see or hear or use.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of praying over. I pray over my set lists and try to let God just lead in that.
Yeah. And when you do that, really, you just don't know what God's going to do on that day to meet people where they are, I
always try to leave open space in the set list, not just open air, but everybody I've worked with, I always tell them, hey, listen, if the Spirit moves in this service, number one, always be prepared to keep going. Mm-hmm. Always be prepared to have space there. As a musician who sings as well, sometimes I'll be at a keyboard, standing there playing and singing, and I'll be like, I had a signal I would give to my team, and it's like, right in the middle of this, we're just going to do this little piece of a hymn, and then it comes back in or whatnot. And so having those moments where you can just see God breathe into the service himself. Mm-hmm. And man, it's a beautiful thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate you jumping in here and having this conversation. And I really do appreciate the work you do in raising the next generation. It is much needed. I'm telling you, man. Yeah. So stay strong. Keep doing it.
we'll keep going and eating some burritos. That works.
Eat some burritos along the way. So,
Absolutely.
All right. He is Jamie Lawrence, and he is at Campbellsville University. What's your official title at Campbellsville?
Executive Director of Ministry and Outreach. And then...
is that all, Jamie, at Executive Director of Ministry and Outreach.com?
Not quite. JW Lawrence at campbellsville.edu or jlawmusicman@gmail.com.
There you go. Reach out to Jamie and encourage him if nothing else. And so,
Yeah, I need it.
thank you, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And all your years of friendship. I'll tell you what.
Wow.
Anyway, so thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Josh Huisman Podcast each week. Do me a favor and click subscribe, click follow, whatever it takes, and tell your friends about it, tell your family about it, just to be listening every week, and you can hear from great guests like Jamie Lawrence on the podcast.
Tell your worship pastor. He needs to get on this.
Tell your worship pastor to reach out to Jamie, and they have teams that go out.
We do. We have teams. We'll go anywhere. We're looking at getting out, even outside of Kentucky and going places. So we'd love to work with you in any way possible. If you need someone to come and just to talk about worship, be glad to come and help out with that as well.
All right. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, everybody. Join us every week for new episodes. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.